The door of the stone cottage does not creak when it opens. It simply yields to a hand that has learned its weight. Inside, the hearth is cold. The ashes of the previous night settled into gray silt. Outside, the village is a silhouette against the sky that has not yet decided to be blue. Most people believe that the failure to begin a great work is a matter of fear or a lack of talent. They look for a grand antagonist, a storm, a rival, a mountain too high to climb. But the fracture is quieter than that. It is the sound of a morning that arrived without being summoned. It is the sight of sun hitting the floorboards while one is still under the blankets, realizing the day has already moved forward, and you are merely chasing its shadow. To live without discipline is not to live in chaos. It is to live an unclaimed life. You move through the rolling hills, you exchange pleasantries at the well, and you return home. The plans are there, sketched lightly in the back of the mind: a garden to be cleared, a ledger to be finished, a craft to be mastered. They are not forgotten, they are simply postponed until the mood is correct. The false law suggests that we must feel like the person we wish to become before we can do the work that person does. We wait for the warmth of motivation to strike us like a summer noon. But motivation is a guest that arrives late and leaves early. And to wait for it is to let the seasons dictate the harvest without ever planting the seed. He decides on a Tuesday, not because Tuesday holds any particular weight, not because he has read something or been told something or finally reached a point of sufficient frustration. He decides because the evening felt familiar in a way that had grown uncomfortable. The mild plans, the soft dissolve, the slight sense of arriving at night with less than he'd meant to carry. He sets a time, 5 a.m. No one is waiting for him at 5 a.m. No obligation requires it. There is only the quiet decision made before sleep that tomorrow the day would begin before the day began on its own. When the hour arrives, the room is dark. He lies still for a moment. The warmth is real. The early hour is real. The option to remain is entirely available. He stands anyway. He reaches for the lantern. It is a simple thing of iron and glass, smelling faintly of oil and old wick. In daylight, but it is an unremarkable object. In this hour, it is the only thing that separates the person from the drift. The flame catches, small, steady enough. He laces his boots. The laces are worn at the ends, and the process takes longer than it should. He opens the door and steps outside into the cold, and the village is silent, and the path ahead is dim. He walks. The path runs upward from the village toward a low ridge overlooking the valley. The mist sits heavy in the hollows, clinging to the tall grass. Every morning the body protests. Every morning the mind offers a dozen reasonable arguments for why an extra hour of sleep holds more value than a walk in the dark. He does not argue back. He does not shout down the doubt with affirmations. He simply moves, one foot in front of the other, on the damp earth. The rhythm of the walk begins to pace the heart. At first, the ritual feels like a costume that does not fit. The lantern feels heavy in the hand. The flame sways and threatens to go out with every gust of wind. He feels like a pretender, a person playing at order while feeling the same internal haze. No one knows he is out here. No one will reward him for this mile, but the true law remains. Belief follows repeated structure. The mind does not lead the person. The ritual quietly retrains the mind. By the end of the first week, something small has shifted, not in the world, not in his circumstances, but somewhere in the sequence of waking. The moment between the alarm and rising has compressed slightly. The argument inside the pause is quieter. This is not yet discipline, it is simply repetition finding its shape. He cannot feel the change occurring. That is perhaps the most important part of it, the thing most people misunderstand about this kind of work. The transformation does not announce itself. It accumulates below the threshold of daily awareness, the way a path becomes a path through use rather than through intention. No one builds it, it simply forms. The second week, he misses a morning. He wakes at the right hour, lies still, and lets it pass. Not dramatically, not with guilt. He simply does not stand, and then it is too late, and the morning belongs to sleep. He does not consider this a failure. He considers it a morning. He returns the following day. This is the less visible part of the practice, the returning. But most things that dissolve do so not through a single dramatic abandonment, but through the gradual failure to return. The walk is not lost in the missing, it is lost in the not going back. He goes back. By the fourth week, the cold has arrived properly. This is where the ritual earns something, not because cold is noble, it is simply uncomfortable, but because comfort has begun whispering in ways it did not before. The warmth of the bed is more specific now, the darkness outside more complete. There is a morning, wind cutting sideways across the ridge, the lantern flame dipping and recovering. Where he stops halfway up the path, not from exhaustion, something closer to the question of whether this matters. He stands there for a moment, then he continues, not because he arrives at an answer, because he decides that continuing is the answer and that the question can remain open while the feet still move. He reaches the bench overlooking the valley and sits. But there is a particular kind of stillness that exists only before the birds begin their song, heavy, expectant. The first thin line of light appears at the horizon, pale violet, then a bruised gold. Nothing dramatic occurs. There are no sudden realizations. There is only a steadying of the pulse. The unease that used to haunt the quiet moments of the afternoon begins to thin. When you have already met the hardest part of the day, in the dark, the rest of the world loses its power to unsettle you. And he cannot name the morning when the shift completes itself. There is no morning to name. The shift happens the way identity always happens, not in a single moment, but across many moments, accumulating without announcement. The internal debate that once occupied the first minutes of each day shortens to a few seconds, then to almost nothing. The hand reaches for the lantern before the mind is fully awake. The laces are tied. The path is walked. Now, these things have arranged themselves into sequence, and the sequence has arranged itself into something that no longer requires effort in the way it once did. His posture begins to reflect this. The slight slump of the uncommitted is gone. There is a directness to his movement now. When he stands in the marketplace later that morning, he does not shift his weight from foot to foot. He stands with the stillness of something rooted. And this is what most people misunderstand, that the goal of structure is not to make effort permanent, but to make effort unnecessary. The intention becomes the habit, becomes the identity, and the identity does not need motivation to sustain itself. It simply continues. In the village, the world begins to respond, though he hasn't asked it to. But the blacksmith goes, a man of few words and long memories, watches him pass one morning and says without ceremony, "The iron is hot early today, if you need that tool mended." He offers the work because he perceives a person who is ready for it. The rewards are never sudden. They are cumulative. It is the way people lean in slightly when he speaks, sensing a weight behind the words that wasn't there in the winter. It is the way he handles a mistake, a spilled bucket, at the ruined page, without the old flash of frantic guilt. He simply resets. He begins again. A responsibility at the mill that had passed him over the previous season is offered without explanation. When he contributes to a decision, his contribution lands differently, not because he speaks differently, but because he has become a slightly different source. Structure chosen in private becomes identity in public. He goes to bed while the house is still quiet. There is no anxiety about the coming day. There is no list of half finished promises to keep him awake. He knows exactly what the first hour will look like. He knows the weight of the lantern. He knows the chill of the mist and the stillness of the bench and the slow warming of the valley below. The lantern sits on the table, clean and ready. The iron still scarred, the glass still chipped near the base. It has not changed, but it is no longer a burden carried into the dark. It is simply what he reaches for. It is part of the order now, part of what he is. The light goes out. The room is dark. In a few hours, the hand will reach out again, not because it has to, but because that is who he is now. And that is the only destination this kind of work ever had.